Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278. The St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation, in partnership with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network, presents a podcast for families in crisis.
Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. This is Ann DeSantis, the director of the foundation, joined by Mickey Kelly, our president. And this is our Beatitudes series. We're on the third Beatitude, and the topic for tonight's podcast is Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And so I want to welcome Mickey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for having me once again.
Yeah, this series has been great. And a reminder that this is from our Families in Crisis series, meaning that, this is the main focus of the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation. This is what we do. This is who we're geared to you who are listening, who are going through some kind of adversity or challenge, whether it be something to do with relationship, marriage and family, loss of a job, an illness for you or someone that you love, anything else that falls into that crisis area. That's what we're here for. And before we really dig into our podcast series right now for this one, I just want to invite all of you who are listening to this to make your appointment for your free pastoral consultation with a Mercedarian friar. It's something that we offer all the time, a free 1-hour consultation, and you can have as many of those as you like. So we're here for you, and that's our outreach. So Mickey, let's just dig right into this one. This is Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I wondered if you could just share with us, what does that mean to you in your life?
Well, and I think that the definition of meek, I think some people, when you read the Bible about it, basically, I feel like it means like you're quiet, you're gentle. I always thought that you're like, I honestly think it's somewhat similar to what humble is all about. And it's very hard to come across someone that is like it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is hard to come across someone who's like it because I think we live in a culture right now that, let's face it, when we look at things like social media, TV shows, and just being around people, that sometimes the most boisterous people are the ones that get all the attention. They're the ones that, get to tell their stories and their ideas. And it's the meek people, I think, in a worldly sense that are looked at, as you said, as sort of weak. But in the end, what I'm hearing when I read these Beatitudes is that it means kind of the opposite, because it's a submission to God when we realize that He's much more powerful, that everything that we have is from the Lord, isn't it? And so when we realize that it's not about us, life is not about me being the center and the nucleus of every conversation and everything that I do everywhere that I go. So what I'm hearing when I read that one, and I'll read it again, is that blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means in terms of the Beatitudes. But I would like to turn, if we could, to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the part 3 of the Life in Christ. It's under section 1, man's vocation in the Spirit. It's chapter 1, the dignity of the human person. I'm going to go ahead and read all the Beatitudes just so that for people who are listening for the first time, that the Beatitudes are at the heart of Jesus' preaching. They take up the promises made to the chosen people since Abraham. The Beatitudes fulfill the promises by ordering them no longer merely to the possession of a territory, but to the kingdom of heaven. And here they are. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. So I just turn it over to you, Mickey. Wondered if you could just share your thoughts on just the whole Beatitudes, if there's one in particular that speaks to you. I mean, I know this topic is going to be blessed are the meek, but since we're looking at all of them right now.
Well, I think if we look back at the earlier series so far with blessed in the poor in spirit, I think some people really understand, well, how can I be poor in spirit? Well, I mean, you have to look no further than the example of those that need help with their spiritual faith, their spiritual upbringing. They're the ones that will soon reap the rewards of heaven. All they need now is just the people that could guide them to their ultimate goal in life, and that is to be with their Creator and be in heaven. Just like many of the saints in the church and holy people who have, God willing, causes for canonization, and maybe in God's eye, they were all saints at one point. I mean, that's been one of the Beatitudes that really stood out. And I'm really looking forward to when we dove deeper into, our current Beatitude for this podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly. And good points that you made there, because when somebody reads the Beatitudes, like you said, that blessed are the poor in spirit, I think for those who haven't given themselves into prayer and to really contemplate it, that they mean a lot more than what we think in terms of just the way that it sounds, right? We might hear that and think, oh, well, that doesn't sound so good, because I don't want to be meek. I want to be someone who people listen to. And I want to be someone who people who pay attention to. But it's not about that when we realize that virtue means so much more than being liked by everyone we meet and being able to gain attention by followers. We think about social media, right? I mean, how many people just love to have all that attention with the amount of followers and things like that they can get. It's not, then becomes nothing to do with being meek, right? It's all about me. It's all about what I have to say and how I know everything, and that what I have to say is more important than what somebody else says. But that's not what blessed are the meek is all about, is it? I think it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, I think, and you really touched on a point, especially now we're in this age where people are always looking for ways to get people's attention, of course. And I don't think we have to look any further than social media, of course. And the reason, I mean, honestly, I think you really touched on a very important, because I mean, I think we have maybe someone that is always looking for attention, whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly. And you have people that probably basically post like their life on social media. And there's a right way to use it to harness this digital apparatus. And there's also the type that really shows that you're really not striving for what is pure, good, and beautiful. And I think also too, if we look at the rise in mental issues, and this is just long before we had the worldwide lockdowns, when we had the scamdemic that happened 2 years ago. But one of the things that we really have to we have to really understand that there are people that use social media for all the wrong reasons, whether it's to engage in something that's very unhealthy. There are times where they want to do stalking. They want to try to like draw attention to themselves, so to speak. And that's not how you do it. And I mean, granted, they may have thousands of followers, may have thousands of friends, or whatever the case is. But how often do they remember to behave themselves? When they try to engage, let's say, like, I mean, there are times that I would message just, people, my friends, it's like, hey, how's everything going? I can understand simple things like that. But other times they would engage in flirting and things like that. And that's like, to me, that's a red flag. And also the people that, you look at this day and age, like some of the crimes, like sex crimes and everything that happen, most of it is starting to initiate through, this cyber presence. And I think there's something that we have to do as if we want to be faithful followers, is we really have to fight that temptation to, cyberly stalk people. I mean, it's one thing, sure, you can be physically attracted to someone, but it's another thing, like, you really have to keep those emotions in check. And in order to be meekness, we really have to quiet those like thoughts that are, infiltrating our minds, and just like, exercise virtue.
Yeah, virtue is a key word, because isn't that what I think the heart of what the Beatitudes are all about, right? I just found something here I thought might be interesting, and also want to just acknowledge what you just said, because you're right. It's a certain awareness that we must have, and especially when you said in relationships. I mean, you're a single person, and you were just talking about social media, and even like issues having to do with male, female, and what someone might be thinking about another person, and all that kind of thing. And yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of chastity and a certain amount of obedience to what God wants us to do when it comes to thinking and doing the right thing, right? And going back to meekness, I found this article, which I think is interesting, from the Catholic News Agency. The article is called "Meekness: The Power to Change the World." And part of the article, it says, in modern times, pairing words by rhyme has dealt a death blow to the very laudatory word meek. That this is a perfectly good word and one with biblical meaning. But because meek rhymes with weak, many people simply see the two words as synonyms for the same personal attribute. As a result, what is spoken for someone's fame is now understood to their shame. I think that's interesting, isn't it? I never would have thought of that, but it's true. I mean, you take those two words, meek and weak, and I have to admit, even it went into my head before I really thought about it. But it did kind of entertain my mind that we think of those two words together, but nothing could be further from the truth. Because if you think about it, the person who is meek has a lot of virtue, and that takes strength, doesn't it, Mickey? It takes strength to be the opposite of that. You might think that person is weak, but no, they're not. They're quite strong. They're not weak. And let's talk about inheriting the earth, because back in that time, a biblical time, they were connotating that to inheriting land, inheriting, basically being provided for. That your meekness would be something in the end that would be a true gift to God, that you would be rewarded for, right? You would be rewarded for that. I don't know, Mickey, if you had anything to say on that.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stands out is, I remember one of the lyrics in Lauren Daigle's song, the Daigle's song, is, I am strong because I'm weak in one of her very popular songs. I believe it's called I believe, that's no pun intended too. But and I think I'm just like every time I hear that, like I'm sorry, I think it was called You Say. I'm sorry. I correct myself. I should know this because I used to be a music nut at one point. But like every time I hear that verse, like I am strong because I'm weak, or when I am weak. And I'm like every time I hear that in her most popular song, like I just get chills right down my spine. And I also think of another one too, like I would think of the Kelly Clarkson song, "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger." And I really see that many people can still strive strength, even in moments of weakness. And look at some of the saints in the church. They had, whether physical or mental impairment, yet they drew strength through their joy. Look at Saint Teresa of Calcutta. She's one of the most revered examples of how, even though she went through some of her darkest moments in her depression, she still managed to share joy. She inherited the land herself during her many years of ministering to the poor, especially in Calcutta, to the point where she even got a Nobel Peace Prize. A Catholic nun receiving a Nobel Peace Prize from a secular outlet. And that's very rare. It's very rare you see that these days.
Yeah, that is beautiful. She, of course, is one of my favorite saints. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I love a lot of what you just said, because what I'm hearing, it's almost like the world versus God's view of us and as his children, right? So I'm looking at it that way, is that we as a world, it's like it's all about power, it's all about popularity, it's all about pleasure, those kinds of things. Like that's where people like the success, right? They think of success in those terms. But we know that meekness, right, is a real strength. And I want to go back to that article if I could, because this is the one, Meekness, the Power to Change the World. It says, in a culture that identifies strong people with those who are assertive, meekness is not seen as an asset. In times past, mighty kings and rulers would have considered it high praise if they were seen as meek by their subjects. While, quote, meekness conveys to us moderns the idea of being too gentle or too confrontational or too timid, this is not its root meaning. So I think there's also a misunderstanding with what meekness really means in our society, isn't there? And let's also address who we're talking to during this podcast, because we're talking to families in crisis, individuals who have gone through stuff, whether it be something relationship issue, divorce, separation, job loss, sickness, something like that in those realms. Mickey, I didn't know if you had anything to address with them, because they might be listening to this and thinking, you know what, I'm going through the worst time in my life. And it's hard for me to even think in these terms because I need to have my strength back. And being meek to them might not seem like something they want to do when, they're going through some kind of a cancer, sickness, a loss of a job. Maybe they've even had some kind of a physical thing happen to them. I know, Mickey, you experienced that with something that went on the last year. So if there's something that you want to address to them about the meekness in that respect.
Well, and I actually laid it out perfectly in some of our previous podcast episodes. So I don't think I want to reiterate the story, but there was a time when when I was a victim of a crime. There were times that, even though it could have been it was traumatizing, I mean, to say the least, for sure. But there would have been I did have a setback, even though I was trying to, get the world at my feet, so to speak, inherit the land that is in front of me. And there were times that, there were times like I was a little prideful, but then I realized I really had to learn a little humility through all this, because you know what, there's going to come a point where you're going to need help, you're going to need support regardless. And it doesn't really show that you're weak. It rather shows that you're willing to seek help, especially like if you're trying to recover from the mental repercussions. And another thing too, like if we can just address the families that are listening to this, I really understand that people do hit walls at times. They do, you know, things like that. Because I remember, recently I remember watching It's a Wonderful Life for the first time ever in my life this past Christmas. And I remember how George, the main character, he drew strength from his wife, Mary, because she was her rock, her strength. And she was willing to rally all the people that George has helped, you know, during his, you know, through his working endeavor, to get behind and to help him pay off whatever the deficit was. Like it was a little over $8,000, even though he was trying to pay it. But, you know, the antagonist in the movie somehow coughed up that money in a mix-up. And even his guardian angel helped him to draw that strength too. And if you notice in the movie too, how Mary goes further more into the background, because she's watching everything that unfolds, you know, that the fruit of her labor, which was to help her husband, George. And you know what? That's one of the things that we need to do for our spouses, especially if they hit a wall. And if it not necessarily is, you know, being an $8,000 debt or anything like that, but it could be a loss of a job. It could be times when we have a freak medical crisis, or when we are mourning, or when our spouse is on the verge of burying a relative or even a parent. Your spouse needs to be there through thick and thin. And that's how they can inherit the land.
Oh, that's beautifully said. I don't think I've ever heard it quite said that way, that spouses having to support one another and the whole correlation with inheriting the land. I mean, it is so true, because when you marry someone, obviously, I mean, that's a covenant, right? And it's more than just a relationship with someone. It's when, especially for us who are Catholic, you know, I mean, that sacrament of holy matrimony, where it's it's a true sacrament, right? Christ is in the middle of all of that. And he's with you, especially if you are really living out your faith. Now, I know also listening to this podcast too, we have people who are affected by divorce, and they might be thinking, you know, I do believe in marriage, but mine didn't work out. And I just want to say to you who are listening that, you know, that's why we're here for what we do, because we are all about families in crisis, and also that support that we have for those affected by divorce continues. Right, Mickey? I mean, we have a special podcast every single month that's specifically for you. So I just want to address that as well. Now, I found something else in that article that I was referring to a little bit earlier, and it's talking about anger. And what it says is that the Greek philosopher Aristotle defined meekness as a virtue because it is a balance between two extremes. It stands between becoming angry at the wrong things and not becoming angry at anything. It is the mean between being reckless and being cowardly. When adversity or hardship strikes, instead of yielding to anger, the meek person remains calm and self-possessed, and thus is able to deal rationally with the unavoidable sufferings of human existence. I think that's worth reading again for both of us and for people listening, because if you're a person going through adversity, you might be angry. You might be angry that you lost your job. You might be angry that you have a health problem. You might be angry that your child is going through something really difficult. You might be angry that you're not getting along with people in your family right now, or that you have a loss of friends or loved ones. But it says in here that, talking about what I just discussed, that when adversity or hardship strikes, instead of yielding to anger, the meek person remains calm and self-possessed, and thus is able to deal rationally with the unavoidable sufferings of human existence. Mickey, let's talk about that, because I know you understand that too, not just with what you went through last year, but just other things. Both of us have dealt with that whole idea of anger. Um, any advice for someone listening who needs to find that meekness because they do feel very angry about what someone has done to them?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is there are things that are out of your control. And there are times where, well, one of the things that, and there are times too that I got angry with, loss of a job. But when I look back at it, I realized I thought it was for my own good because I was in a very toxic environment. I mean, I had good coworkers. It's just the superiors were a little edgy, so to speak. So, I mean, I'm kind of grateful, something like that. I was kind of removed for a and let's face it, the saying goes, everything happens for a reason. And this was one of them. But to offer advice on, let's say, if you were a victim of a crime, it's okay to be angry about it, but it's something that, like, you can't be mad at the world about. And you have seen the times where I posted videos of my update, whether it was a recovery or, thanking people, because I also had I had a GoFundMe to help cover some. I was in a hole a little bit because I was trying to do what I can to keep up with medical expense, especially with the therapy and everything. Some of the things that we really have to acknowledge is that, like I said, yes, you can. Yes, it is normal to be angry because over things like, for example, if you were a victim of a crime, yes, these criminals, they violated your dignity. But the last thing you want to do is seek revenge. The last time I checked, the best revenge you can ever get when someone trespasses against you is mercy and forgiveness. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast, perhaps you got your 1 month notice, or your layoff from your job came like a thief in the night. Just know that there's something better for you. And all you have to do, it does take patience, yes, but also at the same time, Moses didn't just wait for the 10 commandments to come to him. Rather, he went up Mount Sinai. He went to God. You too should do the same thing.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love how you covered in what you just said, job loss. I know that we as a foundation haven't done a whole lot on that, Mickey. But it just came to me that I do think that this is an area that we really should talk about more, because there are people who feel hurt, angry, and confused about what to do about their future. And there's a certain kind of giving things to God that we all need to do in our lives. I mean, of course, we need to pray and we need to act. And that's an important thing in terms of he being healed, right? It's not like we're not in charge of our lives. God is. And so sometimes those opportunities that come, they come in his time. And you know what? That doesn't just apply to people who lost their job. I mean, there's people listening to this right now that maybe it's a relationship that you're feeling lost and hurt. And, why did this happen? Why is this person not in my life anymore? And you might feel angry. And that's going to take me back to what our topic is for tonight, which is the blessed are the meek. And I have another article quote that I want to read. It's talking more about the anger from CatholicCulture.org, blessed are the meek. It says that Here we must mention the sin of anger, a violent reaction whose impulse we all know. Who is not being angry sometimes? We all have. We must overturn the Beatitude and ask ourselves one question. How many things have we destroyed with rage? How many things have we lost? A moment of anger can destroy many things. One loses control and does not evaluate what is really important, and one can ruin the relationship with a brother, sometimes without remedy. As a result, anger. Many brothers no longer speak to each other. They distance themselves from each other. It is the opposite of meekness. Meekness brings together. Anger separates. Let's really unpack that, Mickey. Meekness brings together, and anger separates. I think that's really the key and the heart of what this virtue is all about and what this beatitude, if you think about it. Because meekness is modeling after Jesus, who always wants us to be brought together as a community, as a family, as a church, as a world. He wants us to be brought together, doesn't he? So I don't know if you have anything to say about that, because I think that's a really, it's a revelation, I think, to think that meekness brings together and anger separates.
I honestly think that's a bold statement, to be fair, because let's face it, Jesus did say that he will cause divisions for sure. But at the same time, he does want to call the sinners. And truthfully, I think you really hit the point, because there was a time my siblings actually had a fallout, my two older ones. And long story short, it basically boiled down to a fight over kids. Because it wasn't intentional, of course. Like my one nephew accidentally hit my niece, and my brother, my sister-in-law were a little fed up. And at the time, my sister was pregnant with my other nephew, and my brother was like making these wild accusations that my nephew had autism or something, the way he was behaving. But the reality is, kids at that age, they don't really understand, how to behave. And that's where the parents really come in, of course. But my sister did a terrific job anyway. So, but I really honestly think that the first thing you must do is don't make a situation worse. That's my best advice. And the other thing that we really have to understand is that meekness is when, we reach out to people and be like, hey, let's have some fun, let's, come together and let's throw away our differences. And the last thing we want to do is cause fights or cause havoc or whatever. Okay, that's where you scare people away. And my one of the things that I could really take away from all this is that the most valuable thing is that bitterness in your heart won't make you happy. It will bring you down. Whereas meekness strengthens your joy.
That's beautiful. I love your reference to joy, because I know that you brought that up on some of your own videos on your Instagram channel. And for that matter, I don't want to forget to do this, because I think it's important that you yourself also have a beautiful message on your own Instagram and YouTube channel. Just take a minute or two and tell us about that, because I think it's important that the people on this podcast can listen to some of your beautiful gospel reflections that you have every week and your YouTube channel. Can you tell them where to find that, Mickey?
Sure. So on my YouTube channel, and we'll feature this in the description section of this episode, the Catholic Philadelphian, and once a week I will be posting videos, and spontaneously I could post a random reflection on this or that. Just wish I was a little more frequent with it, of course. And also on Instagram, Mickey.Kelly2, I usually post weekly videos as well on things that are like on my heart. And it could be anything from weekly gospels, or it could be something that is happening, such as, at the time we're recording this, we have the I would say pro-life month. Of course, you had the March for Life, and I was actually preparing for my trip to Washington, which I've been doing for the past several years. And of course, I will be having a reflection on that. So no worries about that. So you've all been warned. And usually I would reflect on the readings and maybe just try to cultivate what can we get out of it. And let's face it, I mean, I have said this in many recordings like this, and of course the interview we had years ago. One of the things that we really have to understand is that there may be something that a priest would miss when they give their homily every given Sunday or during daily mass. And maybe I find a way that it could be shortened to anywhere between 5 to 8 minutes, where many priests can go on to, I know one priest, he goes on for like 22 minutes, yet he's still on point, but I feel like he takes too much time. I mean, granted, I understand that for priests, you have to take 8 minutes, but there are some priests that feel like they just need to hear themselves talk, so to speak. And one of the things that we really have to understand, and honestly, like, I do speak from the heart for sure. And there are times that we really have to really engage people, especially on especially on a platform like this.
Yeah, great points. And I'm really glad that you brought up your own social media and videos, because quite frankly, I really enjoy them. And I think they're very educational. And on another note, for you who are listening, who are families and individuals in crisis, Mickey really speaks to that when he does his gospel reflections and his YouTube videos. So be sure that you connect with him there. I want to go back, if I could, to that article, because I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. Is Catholic culture, blessed are the meek. It says meekness is the conquest of many things. Meekness is capable of winning the heart, saving friendships, and more, because people anger, but then they calm down, think about it, and go back over their footsteps. And so you can rebuild with meekness. Don't you think that's true? I love that idea. It says saving friendships. Isn't that true? Sometimes, you get into an argument with someone, whether it's going to be your spouse, your child, your parent, your cousin, your aunt, uncle, people you work with, whoever it is. And you might walk away and it didn't seem to really end. There was no kind of like nice little bow at the end of that disagreement. But then you let it calm down. The meek person can let it rest, don't you think? I think the meek person can let things go. So my words of advice to people listening who have that feeling of that uneasiness, something didn't go the way you wanted it to, and it's like a knife in your heart that you're still worried about the situation, whether it has to do with an illness, a job, a relationship, whatever it is. But I think there's a real virtue in being able to say, you know what, I'm going to trust God with this. I'm going to let God work through the Holy Spirit in that person's heart, but not just in that person's heart, in mine, right? It's going to work in mine. And I really do think, and I love what this quote says here from this article, that it says that people anger, but they calm down, think about it, and go back over their footsteps. And so you can rebuild with meekness. Nikki, what do you agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with you too. Now let's talk a little bit, if we could, about the land, because that's part of that quote, isn't it? That they won't hurt the land. And this article also says the land to be conquered with meekness is the salvation, that brother of whom the Gospel of Matthew himself speaks. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. That's from Matthew 18:15. There's no land more beautiful than the hearts of others. There's no land more beautiful to gain than the peace found with a brother. And that is a land to inherit with meekness. I just love that. I just think that is very valuable information, something to ponder over again, that there's no land more beautiful than the hearts of others. There's no land more beautiful to gain than peace, right? Isn't that what it's all about, is finding peace in God, peace with other people. And I do believe that for you who are listening, who are in crisis, that's good advice for you. Mickey, we got about 5 more minutes on this podcast. I didn't know if you had any other stories or anything else that you wanted to share about meekness in your own life.
Well, I think we covered everything, especially in this episode. But if I may close with advice for everyone, and just I might reiterate some earlier points, but just know that, God has made things happen to help you, strengthen you, or even test your strength in the moments of when you're most vulnerable. Let God in when it comes to that moment. And most importantly, just know that God is your strength, even in moments of when things are good, bad, and ugly. And he will always be with you.
That is beautiful advice that we all need to hear, I believe, that God is with all of us. And even if you're suffering right now, we're with you as a foundation. We're with you. And me working as the director of this foundation is a true honor for me, having to be with all of you who follow us. I've been with you now since 2017. Such a blessing for me, and to be working with my esteemed colleague, as he refers to me as well, Mickey, as our president. We're trying to do so much for you. We're trying to be there for you, doing these podcasts, doing the events that we do together, mostly in the Philadelphia area, but we're hoping to expand that out into some other areas and dioceses. So if you're listening to this right now, I just want to bring this up. Our foundation is willing to come to you, to your church, your diocese, your nonprofit, and talk about these very topics. In fact, we could even do something on the Beatitudes for your organization, church, wherever you are. We are located in the greater Philadelphia area, but we do travel. So just be sure to connect with us on our website at nonazis.org and learn more about what we do. I want to finish with reading a little bit about the Beatitudes in the Catechism number 1728-29. Says that the Beatitudes confront us with decisive choices concerning earthly goods and they purify our hearts in order to teach us to love God above all things. The Beatitude of heaven sets the standards for discernment and the use of earthly goods in keeping the law of God. So just remember, our goal, all of our goal is heaven, isn't it? We have a pretty wide range of demographics who listen to this podcast, meaning we have people that are younger, and we also have people who are above the age of 65 or 70, older people too. So, but we're all destined to the end of our lives, no matter where we are. Mickey made a good point. God loves you. God is with you. God will be with you. We will be with you too, because, we're the church. We're all the church, and we're here to serve. That's what the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith is all about. That's what the Mercedarian Religious Order is all about. I want to make a shout out to them. I want to thank our Mercedarians for all they do for us. And please learn about them at orderofmercy.org. And if you or someone you know is considering a vocation to the religious life, whether it be to be a priest or brother or even a sister, make sure they reach out to the Mercedarians. The fourth charism to their vows are that willingness to give their lives for those in danger of losing their faith. You know what? That's what we're all about. That's what the St. Raymond and Nonnatus Foundation is all about. That's what Mickey and I are all about. So please do make that appointment, as I said at the beginning, for your pastoral consultation, to speak with a Mercedarian friar, to be healed, to be listened to. That's what we're all about. So I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to invite you to also support us. We are a nonprofit 501c3 Catholic foundation who, continues to keep going because of your support. So go to our website at nonatus.org and considering making a donation of any size. We really appreciate that so much. Now, next month, our topic will be, for blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Mickey and I will be back again the last Thursday of February. So keep your eyes and your ears open. Mickey, again, thank you so much for being a co-host with us, with me, with this podcast.
Thank you for having me, Anne.
God bless everyone. We will see all of you next month with the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more information about the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, visit nonatus.org or email director.srnf@gmail.com. Did you enjoy this podcast? Listen to other podcasts from Patchwork Heart Ministry by following Patchwork Heart Radio wherever you listen to podcasts.